I knew it was important to use the term genetically modified organism because I stand by my initial statement, and I'll explain later.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and briefly read from this article here. It says, widely shared claims on social media link to a video alleging that a future vaccine against COVID-19 would genetically modify humans. This claim is scientifically untrue. Now, this article goes on to reference the World Health Organization saying that a DNA vaccine, quote, involves direct introduction into appropriate tissues of plasmid containing the DNA sequence encoding the antigen against which an immune response is sought. The procedure does not create a genetically modified organism, which the Food and Agriculture Organization defines as an organism which one or more genes, called transgenes, have been introduced into its genetic material from another organism using recombinant DNA technology.
What's considered in GMO and what's not considered GMO, irradiating things and having multiple chromosomes, that's not GMO. Whereas things where you intentionally insert in things in a very careful known way, that is GMO. Things where you intentionally insert in things in a very careful known way, that is GMO.
Now the article goes on to quote Mark Linus, a visiting fellow at Cornell University Alliance for Science Group, debunked the idea that a DNA vaccine could genetically modify an organism. Linus told Reuters that no vaccine can genetically modify human DNA. Quote, that's just a myth, one often spread intentionally by anti-vaccination activists to deliberately generate confusion and mistrust, he said. Quote, genetic modification would involve the deliberate insertion of foreign DNA into the nucleus of a human cell. Quote, genetic modification would involve the deliberate insertion of foreign DNA into the nucleus of a human cell.
Things where you intentionally insert in things in a very careful known way, that is GMO.
And vaccines simply don't do that. Vaccines work by training the immune system to recognize a pathogen when it attempts to infect the body. This is mostly done by the injection of viral antigens or weakened live viruses that stimulate an immune response through the production of antibodies. Now, this article continues to go on. I'm not going to read the entire article, but it will be linked below. But basically, according to the fact checkers at Reuters, their verdict is this report is false. That our previous interview that Dr. Kaufman, yourself, and I did, where you were saying that this new COVID vaccine could genetically modify humans is false. They say a future COVID-19 vaccine will not genetically modify humans. DNA vaccines do not integrate the virus DNA into human cell nucleus, which seems to be their whole point, their whole thesis behind their point fact-checking this previous video that we did. Now, you said before that you stand by your claims. Can you please elaborate on that? What is your take like on when you first had seen this? You said, wow, this is an extremely important topic, of course, but I'd like to get your take and what was your initial response?
Yeah, sure. Well, just a couple of general points about this article. One is it seems to confound the traditional vaccine technology, as they mentioned, which injects a piece of a virus or a full virus, with this new technology that they're trying to develop for the COVID vaccine, which involves DNA primarily, and there's at least one candidate for an RNA vaccine. So this is a totally different technology, and I would talk about them separately. The other thing is it mentions something about putting a protein into the cell, but that's not the case either. It's putting genetic material into the cell. So I'd like to kind of elaborate and give a little bit of background on biology in case the audience has not studied molecular biology before. So I'm going to go ahead and share screens so that you can see this. So this is just a simple article. Actually, it's a little bit more advanced, but I'm going to make it simple. And this was taught to me is called the central dogma of biology. Okay, the DNA on the top here in this double-stranded helix formation is what contains our genetic information. And it's passed down, from parent to child, and it's in every cell in our body pretty much. And what happens is when our cells wanted to make products, and the main products we make are proteins, what we do is that this strand unwinds, and a piece of it is called transcribed. They put transcription here and made into RNA. And RNA has the direct code for the protein. And the DNA is in the nucleus, and it makes the RNA inside the nucleus. And then the RNA goes outside the nucleus into the other parts of the cell. Specifically, the ribosomes is where proteins are made. So what happens is that there are other little pieces of RNA they don't show here called transfer RNA, and they're coupled to one amino acid at a time, and they basically line up according to these sequences. Each three of these letters codes for one amino acid, and those are the building blocks of the protein. So basically you have DNA transcribed to RNA, then RNA moves outside of the nucleus into the cell, in the cytoplasm, and to the ribosomes where it's made into proteins. And that's essentially how everything in our cell is made. So, as you said on the article here, it says that it would basically not involve the insertion of foreign DNA into the nucleus. And that's the main argument of why they feel what I claimed was incorrect.
The procedure does not create a genetically modified organism, which the Food and Agriculture Organization defines as an organism which one or more genes, called transgenes, have been introduced into its genetic material. Quote, genetic modification would involve the deliberate insertion of foreign DNA into the nucleus of a human cell, and vaccines simply don't do that. They say a future COVID-19 vaccine will not genetically modify humans. DNA vaccines do not integrate the virus DNA into human cell nucleus.
So if we go to this article here from Medscape, now Medscape is a online resource for physicians, pretty much. Most physicians have like an account with them, and they send regular updates about important medical issues, and it's a reference site. So if you're like working in a hospital or in a clinic and you need to look something up, Medscape is one of the references. And so they have this article here written by doctors from the University of Michigan about DNA vaccines, and they basically explain how the DNA vaccines work. And so there's a nice little picture here, and you can see that it shows this is the piece of DNA in a circular form they call a plasmid. It's based on a structure of DNA that comes from bacterial cells originally, and it would have the gene that they're trying to put into us that they say is from a coronavirus. And you can see that it goes across the cell membrane here, through the cytoplasm, and into the nucleus. And right here in the text below, it says the plasmid DNA vaccine carries the genetic code for a piece of pathogen or tumor antigen. The plasmid vector is taken up to the cells and transcribed in the nucleus.
Quote, genetic modification would involve the deliberate insertion of foreign DNA into the nucleus of a human cell, and vaccines simply don't do that.
The plasmid vector is taken up to the cells and transcribed in the nucleus. So that's exactly what it does, what the Reuters article misquotes, that this DNA from the vaccine has to go in the nucleus because that's where it's made into RNA. There's no machinery to make it to RNA in the cell membrane, in the cytoplasm. So it does go into the nucleus. Thus, it is a genetically modification of our own bodies.
Things where you intentionally insert in things in a very careful, known way, that is GMO.
Now, I thought I'd go into a little bit more detail about this for those people who like more detail, and look at a specific vaccine candidate. And this is, by the way, being developed at the Department of Ophthalmology, quite an interesting place for a vaccine development to go on, at Harvard Medical School. But they do gene therapy there, which is a similar technology. Did you have something you wanted to interject?
Yes, Dr. Kupman, if you could just clarify for the viewers and for myself, what is exactly ophthalmology there?
Oh, sure. Ophthalmology is the medical specialty that treats eye diseases. So perhaps there's a genetic eye disease that their researchers there were developing gene therapy for, which is very similar technology where you want to alter the genes of the cells to overcome whatever's causing the disease. So I think that's why these researchers got into the coronavirus game. But they basically develop a gene-based strategy with a DNA vaccine, just like we talked about, and they're using the background material. So they're going to put a gene from what they say is the COVID-19 virus, but they're going to put it inside the background of an adeno-associated viral vector. So that's basically adenovirus or adenovirus, it's pronounced both ways, is another common type of virus that's associated with the common cold, just like coronaviruses are. And so they're using genetic material from an adenovirus and putting the COVID-19 gene inside of it. So I wanted to see, well, how do adenoviruses replicate? And so I found this article here about adenoviruses, and basically, it might be hard to find the right spot here.
And the source of this, is the NIH.gov website.
Yeah, so this is from the Cold Spring Harbor Perspectives in Biology, which is a peer-reviewed journal, and this is on the PubMed website from the Library of Medicine. And here it says members of the family Adenoviridae, which is adenoviruses, are non-envelope blah 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 that replicate in the nucleus. So once again, they're basically using the genetic sequence from this virus to target it to the nucleus. So now we have two separate types of evidence to show that this is actually the strategy with DNA vaccines.
That's pretty profound, because the whole basis of their argument, as you pointed out, for trying to debunk what you had previously claimed in our previous interview, was that what they were injecting into, I'll go ahead and read this again. They say, quote, and this is the visiting fellow, Mark Linus from the Cornell University Alliance of Science group. Of course, trying to debunk what you claimed by saying, quote, that's just a myth, one often spread intentionally by anti-vaxxers. Of course, they want to throw that in there as a derogatory term to try to discredit and move away the idea of engaging in a debate about this. Now, they go on to state that genetic modification would involve the deliberate insertion of foreign DNA into the nucleus of a human cell, and vaccines simply don't do that. And you just showed two sources from legitimate sources that actually say exactly what this does.
The plasmid vector is taken up to the cells and transcribed in the nucleus. Once again, they're basically using the genetic sequence from this virus to target it to the nucleus.
I mean, is that they're injecting DNA, right? Or DNA or RNA into the nucleus, essentially.
Yeah, well, these examples are specifically DNA, which is the most common strategy that's being attempted. The gene that they're trying to put into us that they say is from a coronavirus. And you can see that it goes across the cell membrane here, through the cytoplasm and into the nucleus.
Things where you intentionally insert in things in a very careful known way, that is GMO.